this is MJ, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to make our heavenly herringbone mittens. They match our heavenly herringbone hat, which is also on YouTube. Both of these patterns can be found for free on my blog, or you can purchase the beautifully designed ad-free PDF. So I have 5 sizes included in the pattern. I don't have my larger mitten here, but we have baby, toddler, child, ladies, and a men's size as well. The yarn that I'm using is Swish worsted weight yarn, and I'm using the color Wonderland Heather. You will need 2 crochet hook sizes, so I will use the 4.5 millimeter for the band, the cuff of our mitten, and then the body of the mitten will be worked in the 5 millimeter hook. Now these are wooden hooks from WeCrochet, and I'll have links in the description box on where you can purchase them. I also made a set to match my hat that has 1 strand of Aloft Super Kid Mohair. It's a lace weight, so if you just want a little bit thicker mitten that has that fuzziness to it, you can just add 1 strand of this, so then you're holding a strand of your Swish worsted and a strand of the Aloft together, and it just gives you that nice warm fuzzy mitten. So again, all the links will be in the description box, so you just want to click on that arrow down and you can find all of the links to the pattern, the PDF, and also for the hat. Our mitten will be worked from the cuff to the top, so it's easy to adjust the mitten if you need to make a little bit more length here for the fingers or the thumb. It's really easy to adjust, so let's get started. So I'm beginning with my 4.5 millimeter hook, and we're starting at the cuff. So make a slip knot and put that on the hook. And then we're going to begin with a chain of 17. Okay, so I've made my 17 chains, and now we'll work in the second chain from the hook. 1, 2. So we're just working single crochet stitches across the chain. So I'm going to work that off camera, and you should have a total of 16 stitches. Now we'll chain 1 and turn, and our band is worked in the back loops only. So we're working a single crochet into the back loop, 1 in the back loop of every stitch across. And then we'll chain 1 and turn, and again working in the back loops only. So each row is just repeating itself now, and what you want to do is a total of 22 rows. Okay, so I'm working on my 3rd. It's really easy to count your rows. So as you can see, this ridge is made with 2 rows. So you want to just keep working until you have a total of 22. I'll work my rows off camera, and then I'll meet you back up and count them with you just to show. When you work in even numbers like this, it's really easy to count your rows. You work an even number. So if you go over to the blog, you can get the pattern with all of the sizes or the beautifully designed PDF, and I'll have baby to adult size included. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and work that off camera, and then I'll meet you back up once I've completed that. Okay, so I've worked up my band, and I have a total of 22 rows, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. So when you lay out your band, you just want to count by 2s each of the ridges. So I have a total of 22. So now this is the right side of my work. So I'm finishing on that right side. I'm going to chain 1, and then what you're going to do is just fold your work together. And then we are going to slip stitch this band together. So going through the back loop only, over to that starting chain, we're going to slip stitch. So pull your yarn through and through that loop on your hook. Go through the back loop and the next chain and just work all the way across. And this method gives our band a really nice seamless look. It will just blend right in. So I will continue slip stitching that together and then I'll meet you up. Okay, so I've slip stitched this all together. Then I'm going to chain one. I am not going to do anything with the work because this band will be flipped over like this. And as you can see, it just blends in nicely, the slip stitch join. So we're just keeping our work like this. And now we're just going to work sort of a setup round, working around the edge now of the cuff. So you want to work 1 single crochet per row. So we know that we had 22 rows, so we'll be working around 22 single crochet stitches. So into that first row, work a single crochet, into the next row, a single crochet. And I really like to look at each of my rows. So you can see here, this row has that little bunchier, thicker section that you're going to push your hook through. And then the next row is more like just a little loop. And that's really easy now to just, as you work around, you know you're doing each row. So I'm going to complete working that around off camera and then I'll meet you up for the slip stitch join. Okay, so I've worked around now 22 stitches and then I'm going to find that very first single crochet stitch. I'm going to slip stitch into it by going under both of those loops, grabbing the yarn, pull it through, and slip stitch to join. Now what we'll do is change over to the larger hook, so the 5mm crochet hook, and I will chain one. Now we're going to begin working that herringbone single crochet stitch. So I'm going to work through this very slow with you just in case you have not yet learned how to do this stitch. I do have a few video tutorials. I have one that's in bulky weight yarn, so maybe I will link that in the description box for you if you're struggling to see with the smaller hook and yarn. I do have a video with that big hook and big chunky yarn that might be easier to see. But if you've already made one of the herringbone patterns, you'll already be familiar with it. The first row is the easiest. It's the reverse herringbone single crochet that's a little trickier. So what we'll do is go into that very first stitch, not counting the chain one as a stitch. So that's why we're working into the first one. So now the first one, we're just working a regular single crochet. Notice how I pulled that up just so those bars are quite loose. If they are tight, you're going to really struggle to work into them. So just make sure they're loose. Now I'm going to slide the hook under the second bar. And then I'm going to work into the next stitch. I'm going to pull up a loop. So now I have 3 on the hook and I make sure again that this third loop is pulled to the height so that I can work into it on the next stitch. So we're pulling through. So we're going through the third bar, 1, 2, 3, into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. You do not want to do this stitch tight. I can't say that enough. You want it nice and loose. So if that means having to go up to a bigger hook, then that's what you need to do. So now we'll go into the next stitch, but we will need to do some increases as well on this round. So I'm to my 4th, 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 4th stitch, we are going to go back and do another herringbone single crochet. So going under the bar, we're just going back down now into the same stitch for the increase. So my increase pattern will be work 3 and then work 2. So we'll go through that third bar, and that's the trick. You're making basically a single crochet, but you're always working through the third bar. And then when you pull up a loop, you have 3 on your hook, you yarn over and pull through 3. So there's 3, and in the 4th stitch, we will work 2. So now I'll just repeat that pattern around, and when I get close to the end, I'll meet you up again. Okay, so I've worked around my repeat. So this here was my stitch that I did my increase. You should have 2 stitches remaining, and we'll just work 1 in the last 2 stitches. Now we'll slip stitch. Again, you want to find that very first single crochet, and you want to know what? I think stitch markers for this pattern could be really helpful. We're going to be turning rounds, and that can get tricky. It's really easy to lose a stitch or miss a stitch. So I'm just going to grab a couple stitch markers, and this is going to help us out. Okay, so I've grabbed a couple stitch markers. Now, if I had marked my first stitch, I would know that this is it. Sometimes it can get mistaken for the slip stitch join. I don't know, sometimes it can just get confusing. So if I had marked it, I would have known for sure. But what you want to do is mark your last stitch right here. So let's push this little marker in. I'm going to slip stitch to join. I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to add a marker to that stitch as well. Keep it in there. Okay, so this is, we know what stitch is what, and this is going to be really helpful for us. So what we're doing now is we're turning. So think if you're working a row, we would be turning, we would be on the wrong side, and we would be working back along. So for this stitch, this is what I want you to do. Every round we're going to turn, so like we're going back and forth in rows. So now I know this is the stitch that I want to work into, my stitch marker's in it. So I can take that out. And this is the tricky stitch. To do a reverse single crochet, what we're going to do is go from the back to the front. The important thing is we always need to keep this yarn to the front, not to the back. If it goes to the back, it's going to create a loop back here, which we don't want. So the other thing to remember is let's examine the stitch. See how there's this little loop here, and then there's these loops here. So this is actually the stitch. There's our nice beautiful V's, and then this is a little extra loop. When we come through, we don't want to touch this loop. We want to go under the stitch here and make sure you're not grabbing that loop. If you do, again, it's going to distort your work and it's not going to look great. So let's go with the first one. The first is just a reverse single crochet. So we're just going to take our hook, push it through, making sure that loop's under it, grab the yarn, pull it through, fully rotate your hook. I like to give it a little tug because that's going to keep the stitches loose. Yarn over and pull through. Now what we want to do is look at the back of the work here. So there's those 2 bars. We're again working into the second bar and then going under the stitch just like we did on this side, but now we're just doing the reverse of it. So go under the second bar, then we're going to go from back to front under the stitch. Again, make sure that that loop's not affected. You're just grabbing that yarn, pulling it through, rotating your hook fully, yarn over and pull through all 3. Again, you really need to keep this stitch loose or it's going to be a pain to work into those bars. So now we have 1, 2, 3. We're going under the 3rd bar, back to front under the stitch. There's that other loop, so we know we're going under it correctly. We're keeping this yarn always to the front. We don't want it affecting our beautiful herringbone. So pull it, rotate our hook fully, give it a nice little tug to keep the stitch loose, and pull through, and then we're just doing this all the way around. Okay, so one thing I forgot to do is mark that very first stitch. So let's just look. We don't want to mark the slip stitch. We want to make sure that we're marking the first stitch. And this is going to be a lifesaver so that you're not losing count of those stitches, okay? So that's in there. So once you get the hang of this, honestly, once you get it, it will go fairly quickly. And I've practiced with many designs now. The trick is to keep it loose, and then you can see we're going to start getting this nice fishtail braid herringbone look. So I'm going to complete this around off camera, and then I'll meet you up again. Okay, so I've worked all the way around. I'm at stitch 26, so I have one remaining. I like to count as well. So the last stitch here now, I've already put my hook through the bar. We can mark that final stitch. Now we're going to slip stitch in the first stitch to join. Chain one, and I'm going to add back the marker into the first stitch. Now we'll turn. Okay, so now when we turn, we know exactly what stitch we're working into for the next round. Okay, so for this round now, we're just working herringbone, single crochets in every stitch around. Just make sure to add that marker back to the first stitch. Okay, so I've worked the last stitch. I'm going to add in my marker, and I'll slip stitch to the first, and I'm just going to leave that marker in there, and then I'm turning, working back, and we'll be working now the reverse. So the first is just a reverse single crochet. Then you want to go through the second bar. Just added back in my marker. Okay, so I'm just going to work all the way around. I'll slip stitch to join. Chain one and turn. So now we're back again to the right side, and this round we will be adding in our thumb hole. So we're going to work over 9 stitches, and in the 9th we're going to add an extra stitch. Start with a single crochet, and I will mark that. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we're going to add an extra in that 9th stitch. And now I'm going to count over 9 stitches that we're going to leave that space for our thumb. Okay, so I've marked the 10th stitch with a stitch marker. So what you're doing is just we're sectioning off the thumb. I'm going to come through here though and go through my 3rd bar. Need to get over here to that 10th stitch. Just going to puff that up so I know what stitch I'm going into. Pull up a loop. So now we have 3 on the hook. Pull through all 3. And then we need to go through the bar and go back down through the stitch again. And then we'll just work across the remaining 8 stitches. Okay, so now we're going to slip stitch to join. And at this point you should now have 20 stitches, and what we're going to do, so we'll turn, work our reverse single crochet, and then we're just doing rounds now. There is no more increasing. The decreasing will happen on the last round, but we've worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want you to work another 5 rounds so that we have a total of 10. So you're working 20 stitches and you're just doing reverse herringbone single crochets, just like I showed you, slip stitch to join and then turn, go back and do your regular herringbone single crochet. So we want 5 more rounds so that we have a total of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the 11th will be the decrease. So I'm going to go ahead and work those off camera and then I'll meet you back up. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And our final round will be doing some decreases. So to do our decrease, we're going to go through the stitch, pull up a loop, go through the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. Now we'll go through the 3rd bar, go through the next stitch, pull up a loop, go through the next stitch, pull up a loop. So now we have 4 on the hook, yarn over, and pull through. So go through the 3rd bar, go through the stitch, pull up a loop, go through the next stitch, pull up a loop, 4 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 4. So we're just doing this all the way around. So we're reducing from 20 stitches down to 10. So I've completed that around. I'm going to slip stitch in our first stitch to join. Then we can fasten off. Okay, and then what we can do is take a yarn needle We're going to work through the front loops only of every stitch. Then you can just weave your tail to make sure the top of the mitten is closed. You're going to weave it one way and then weave it back into the opposite direction just to secure that. So I'm just going to finish that off and then I can trim. So now for the thumb, you want to find that first stitch we skipped. So remember we skipped a total of 9 stitches. So what we're going to do is join in our yarn, work a single crochet, and then we'll work a herringbone single crochet into every stitch. Now, I actually want to make sure that I leave a decent tail, because we can use that tail when we're finished just to sew the little bit of hole that's going to be there from the thumb. So let me just do that again. So we'll single crochet and then we'll herringbone single crochet around. So we want a total of 9. So there, we have a total of 9. Then what you want to do is come in here. So this tail can be left for sewing. You want to find that first. If you need to use your markers again, use your markers. We're going to slip stitch into the first. Now this is going to be really fiddly getting in here to make this thumb because it's so small. Chain 1 and turn. Okay, so now we're going to work that reverse herringbone single crochet. Like I say, this is the part you're not going to enjoy as much. It's really fiddly and really small to work in here. Just take your time. And work around your 9 stitches. Okay, so now we're back to the right side, which is a little bit easier, but now we're going to be doing the decrease. We're going to decrease it just like the top. Now, I didn't mention this before, but you could try this little mitt on if you're making it for someone. You can try it on as you go if you needed to make that section a little bit longer for their fingers or the thumb a little bit longer. You can just add that length. So what we're going to do, the same as we worked decreases before. Okay, so single crochet decrease, and then the herringbone single crochet decrease. And this one's, because we have 9 stitches, it's not going to come out even, so I suggest just doing as many as you can and then just ending with 1 stitch in the last. Okay, so just complete that around. It's really fiddly. I'm going to finish this off camera and then I'll meet you up for the final weaving. Okay, so I've slip stitched all ready to join. I'm just going to fasten that off now. So this section is worked just the way we closed up the top of the mitten. We're just going to weave through the front loops every stitch around. Now that is looking loose there, so I have a little loose loop, so I'm just going to kind of weave that just to kind of tuck that in. So you're just going to weave, and then I'm going to do that off camera. I'm going to show you how it's harder to see on this littler mitten. There is a little hole there. So what you can do is just take this tail with your yarn needle and you can just sew that tail closed. That's just going to close all that up, and then you can just weave that tail. So here are our completed toddler size mittens. These were so fun and cute to work up. They are tiny. So like I say, if you need to add a little bit more length, like for maybe a 2-year-old, you could just slightly alter this. If not, the next size up would be our child, this size here, which again, you could make a little longer on the hand or the thumb if you needed to. So it does jump up quite a bit, so if you need to alter that, but otherwise this is going to fit a baby to small toddler, 1-year-old, so you could mix it with the baby size hat if you need to, or go up to the toddler size hat. You really just want to measure the child that you're making these items for, because I find some babies' heads grow really fast and you're going to go up to a toddler size. So just measure their head first and follow the charts in the pattern. And I have the chart for the mittens as well. So if you measure their hand beforehand, then you know exactly what size to make and how to alter them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and tap that bell to stay updated on all my new videos and tutorials. Thanks so much, guys. Have an awesome day.